Hello and welcome to the third lecture of this course, which is going to be on flow control. In previous lessons we learned how to write code and that it will execute starting from line 1 to the last line, and each line will execute, of course, if it's not a comment. But what if we wanted to make some code execute only if a certain condition is met? And of course we can do it in Python programming language, and that's what we're going to learn today. Before we start, first we will learn a new data type, which is called a Boolean data type. And then we will learn how to actually execute conditionals using the if, elif, and else statements. And then we will learn about different operators that can help us carry out our conditional logic in our program. So let's start with a Boolean data type. We already know how to store numbers, in particular integers and real numbers, and we know how to store strings, aka text. There is this particular data type in every programming language that's called a Boolean. In some languages it's called bool. And this data type can only store one of two values, 1 or 0, true or false. And as you can see, when I type them in my atom, they have different colors. That's because they're reserved keywords in Python programming language. And just like any other data, we can store them in variables. For example, let's create a variable called bool and store true in it. And if we try to print it, let's comment out everything else so that it doesn't affect our running. If we run our code, it will print true, and the same for false. So what this data type actually means is it's a single bit stored in memory, which is either a 1 or a 0, which can help us store one bit of information. But the reason it's very helpful in our flow control and our conditional logic is that's because our logic is going to be evaluated to either true or false, and depending on what it is evaluated to, it will decide whether a certain code will be executed or not. And we're gonna see how that is used right now. So there are three keywords in Python, that's if, elif, and else, that are used to control flow. There are more which we'll learn in later lessons, but let's start with this for now. And let's start with an if statement. It's pretty self-explanatory. If says if a certain condition is met, then execute this code. So if brackets, and you put a true statement in brackets, and if that true statement evaluates to true, our Boolean data type, then this code will be executed. Also notice each code in this if statement is placed with an indent, which is actually equal to 4 spaces. And if I were to ruin this indent to 3 spaces, it would not work, because Python is very strict about that. So that's 1 tab or 4 spaces. Also, you don't actually need brackets in Python 3, I believe. You can just write it as your true statement as it is. But if it is a very long true statement, then it's quite complicated. I recommend using brackets so that it's clear to see where it begins, where it ends. So let's start with if true, print true. What this is telling Python is if the statement inside the brackets evaluates to true, this code will be executed. And let's run it. True and false is printed. False is from our previous example actually, so let's comment it out. But true is printed as we expected because the evaluation in the brackets is equal to true. If, however, we pull it to false and we run our program, nothing is printed. That's because the evaluation inside the brackets is equal to false. And we would actually usually put some kind of comparison or some kind of logic inside these brackets, which we would want to carry out in our program. So for example, if you were logging into the website, we would want to check if the person's age is above a certain number, for example, above 18, if they are trying to watch some scary movie or something. And we would check it in our brackets, and then if it is over 18, we would allow them to go in. If it's not, we would tell them, sorry mate, you're not old enough. So actually let's do that now. Let's create a variable called age, and let's put the age to 16. And let's say if age is greater than 18, print welcome to the website. We run our code and nothing is printed because this logic statement evaluated to false. Age is not greater than 18. If we set the age to 19 and run our code again, it will say welcome to the website because now our logic statement does indeed evaluate to true because 19 is indeed greater than 18. And if we set it to 18 and try to run our code again, nothing will be printed. That's because 18 is not greater than 18. It is equal to 18, in which case we would actually use greater than or equal comparison operator. And now we would be welcome to our website. So below here you can see a list of readily available comparison operators in Python and the readily available logical operators. We will get to how to use logical operators in a second. But all of these operators, comparison operators, allow us to compare values that we have stored in our memory or that we have gotten from somewhere else. So right now we are comparing the age with a set number. Now, if we wanted to welcome our user to our website if their age was greater than or equal to 18, but if it's not, we would want to tell them, sorry, you're not old enough. We would use an else statement. Notice the indent as well. Else, print, you're not old enough. And let's change age back to 10 and run our code. It will print you're not old enough. So what else does is the code under the else statement will execute whenever the conditional logic inside the if statement evaluates to false. So right now age is equal to 10. It is not greater or equal to 18, and therefore it is false, and therefore our else statement will be triggered and the code under else statement will be executed. And there is a third and final statement, and that's a elif statement. And it works just like an if statement, but it will only execute if the if statement fails, if the if statement evaluates to false. So for example, if age is greater than or equal to 18, and it is not because age is 10, but if age is greater than or equal to 10, print you can only watch some stuff. So you can see it printed, you can only watch some stuff because the first statement evaluated to false, this code was not executed, and the second statement evaluated to true, so this code was executed, and the else statement, it did not reach the stage because the second elif statement triggered. And you can only have one if, one else, and as many elifs as you want in a single block. And after that block is finished, obviously you can start an if statement again if you want. You can have as many of them in your code as you like. Comparison operators are not limited to comparing numbers. So we can also compare pretty much anything that we want. So for example, if we wanted to compare some text, if we wanted to only let a person with nickname John onto our website, we could do that. So let's create a nickname variable. That's John, that has John stored in it, and use equal comparison operator. If nickname equals John, we'll print hi John, and in all other situations we will say who are you, because we are not expecting that. As we expected, it printed hi John because nickname does indeed equal to John, and if we changed a nickname to Mike and run it again, it would print who are you, because this logic would evaluate to false. Now we can further use the logical operators, which are shown here, to make our logic more complicated. So for example, there are three main logical operators: and, or, and not. Let's start with an and. They're very similar to plain English, so they're quite straightforward to understand. So what we are basically saying, if nickname is equal to John and some other statement, and age is greater than or equal to 18. So this entire true statement, logical statement, will evaluate the truth only if the first logical statement evaluates the truth and a second logical statement evaluates the truth. If either of them evaluates to false, then the entire logical statement will evaluate to false, and the else statement will be triggered. So let's run it. Can you predict what's going to happen? It's going to say, who are you? Because, well, both of them actually evaluated to false. Nickname is not equal to John, it equals to Mike, and the age is 10, is not greater than or equal to 18. But if we were to change nickname to John and still run it, it would still print who are you, because first statement is true, second statement is false, and the AND operator requires both statements to be true in order for the overall statement to be true. If you used OR, however, it would only require one of the statements to be true in order for the overall statement to evaluate to true. So if nickname is John, or the age is greater than or equal to 18, then this code will execute. So let's run it. It will say, hi John. Actually, in this context, that's not the best thing to say. Hi John, or person aged over 18. So it basically executed this code because one of these statements evaluated to true, and or evaluated the whole statement to true because of that. And the third logical operator we can use is not. What not does is very simple. It converts the result of the logical operation and it reverts it. So if it evaluated to true, it will revert it to false, and if it evaluated to false, it will revert it to true. So the simplest way to show it is, if not false, let's actually change this code. True, false. It printed true because this logic statement changed the false into true using the not logical operator. And we could use it in different ways. So for example, if you wanted to evaluate something and then just flip it, it obviously depends on the context and the use cases of your scenario. But it is useful in certain situations. So there are also comparison operators, there's also logical operators, and there's many more operators you can use in your code, the full list of which you can find online, and I'm going to leave a link in the description below to the W3 Schools website where you can see a very comprehensive list. And that's pretty much it. You can use the logical operators to combine as many logical statements as you want. If you wanted the person to be over the age of 18 and their nickname to be a certain thingy, and they needed to be in a certain country and so on and so forth, you could nest them and combine them in whichever way you like. And you could use any comparison operators to evaluate, to compare your data in the ways that's needed. And with these very simple rules, we can actually write very powerful programs. So right now we only know how to basically print stuff, store some stuff in the variables or in lists, and we know how to do conditional execution. But using only this knowledge, you can already write some very interesting text-based games, for example, where you have a certain directions which can branch into different directions depending on what choices the user makes in the game and whatnot. So basically, using these basic building blocks, you can combine them in whichever way you like to build bigger and bigger and bigger programs, and really the limit is your imagination. Try out building something interesting with this conditional logic in your free time, and if you build something cool, you can share it. All right, till us next time.